These are probably the biggest brook trout anywhere. The Minnipe watershed is huge and roadless, as they say, a word I've always liked the sound of. For that matter, most of Labrador itself is roadless. In something like 120,000 square miles, there are just two highways, both gravel. Anne Marie Lake is just under 100 miles by float plane from the small port and military outpost town of Goose Bay, which is a snug little settlement, even if there isn't much in the way of nightlife. But, of course, that doesn't matter. Unless you get stranded there by weather, which does happen, it's just the place where you get off the twin-prop Dash 8, drive down to the dock, and get on a de Havilland Twin Otter, or one of the other planes I really like, the kind that are probably at least as old as I am, but more dependable. From Goose Bay, Anne Marie Lake lies to the south, in low, rolling hills, thickly forested in black spruce, tamarack, birch, and such. Archetypal, sprawling, cool, damp, dense, sweet-smelling, bug-infested Northwoods lake country. There are countless lakes, ponds, puddles, and sloughs, most unnamed, many of which are connected by flowing channels that most of us would call trout streams, but that are referred to locally as narrows. The fishing in the Minnipe watershed was discovered by Lee Wolf, exploring in his Super Cub back in 1957, and the camp at Anne Marie Lake was established in the early 1960s by Ray Cooper, no relation to the current owners. From the beginning, mostly due to Wolf's prodding, the rule was fly fishing only, with a limit of 1 brook trout per fisherman per trip. Lee said this was the best brook trout fishing in the world, and he thought people should see what a place is like when God manages the fishery, a statement I take to be more poetic than theological. Catch and release with a 1-fish limit was a pretty futuristic idea back in the early 60s, when carnage was still pretty much the rule at wilderness camps, and they say the guides squawked louder than the clients. But records going back 3 decades indicate that the fish are about as big now as they ever were. That's a claim not many camps that have been in operation that long can make. Without getting too sloppy about it, I have to say the fishing here is a testament to the radical idea of doing the right thing in the first place, instead of screwing it up and then trying to fix it later. If there's anything wrong with the way all this was handled, it's that, unbelievably, you can't find a Wolf Lake or even a Lee's Narrows on the map. On the other hand, you can still fish Howard's Point with the very Howard for whom it was named. The guides now at the camp are sold on catch-and-release fishing, and they handle the brookies tenderly. Technically, though you are allowed to keep that one fish as a trophy, and some anglers still do that, A.K. and I didn't, nor did anyone else in camp that week. But I can't say the temptation wasn't there. I don't know if the guides actually discourage the practice, because it never really came up, but I can say they don't encourage it, even when a fish is clearly trophy-sized. The upshot has been, in the previous 2 seasons, only 8 brook trout have been killed at the camp, and there's evidence that even the headhunters are mellowing out a little, beginning to wonder what point they're trying to make. I talked to a guy several years ago who'd been to Anne Marie and had caught a 6-pounder that he'd had stuffed. He carried photos of the mount in his wallet. Then he went back the following season and got a 7.5-pounder. I really wanted to kill that fish, he said, but then I thought, what the hell would I do with the little one? I will admit that when I landed my 7.25-pounder, I mean a 7.25-pound brook trout for Christ's sake, I experienced a moment of weakness. The guide was holding the trout in the net. I looked at him, he looked at me and said, "Nice fish, eh?" I said, "Yup," and he released it. It was a fairly close call. Later, over shore lunch, A.K. said, "You're never going to mount a fish, are you?" I said, "I don't know. Maybe not." I've always held off on